From the studios of the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg, welcome to Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvia Jacobs.
And welcome to another episode of Prime Minister Talks. I'm Cedric Peterson alongside the Prime Minister of St. Martin, the Honorable Sylvia Jacobs. And this time around for our episode PM, we've got a guest in the building.
Yes,
and that is first time we want to welcome the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Honorable Christopher Waver.
Thank you very much. Thank
Great
you for
to
having
have
me.
you. Thanks
It's
so
a
much
pleasure
for
being
being
here
in the
today.
program.
Thank you.
Yes,
And,
we did promise we would have
the
intermittently have ministers come in and not just have me answering questions that relate to other ministries. But PM Talks is about sharing information with the public. And so I'm very happy today to have also the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Roaming here with me to assist with some of the questions.
And this is going to be a great program. This is episode 7 of Prime Minister Talks. And let's jump right into our questions that were posed this week to the Prime Minister's cabinet. PM, since becoming Prime Minister of St. Martin, how do you manage staying healthy with all the pressures that comes with being in that office?
Well, that's such a good question. I was like, wow, somebody cares about me out there. It's been really, really hectic actually since September, even prior to becoming Prime Minister, holding the portfolio of formateur, let's call it a portfolio because it's constant work, and being a member of parliament and then transitioning over to being a Prime Minister and then preparing for elections, and then elections are over and now back into formateur seat, holding the Member of Parliament seat since the 10th. And as we can see from my press release that I did have to relinquish that one just for sanity's sake, as well as to allow Parliament to be able to function properly. So even just holding the portfolio of the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs is a pretty hectic job. I thought ECYS was hectic. I'm seeing that this ministry is also quite hectic. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to do. And we are busy with the rebuilding. So staying healthy, what we have incorporated is having a lot of healthy snacks around during our meetings, fruits and healthy snacks. I've cut back drastically on sugar intake. I'm still lacking the time properly to do the exercise my body requires. So that's still a challenge. I'm getting a few squats in here and there. And luckily, my watch reminds me it's time to get up. And so I try to stay moving. I take the stairs as often as possible. And so I'd like to encourage the general public to not allow your lives to become so hectic that you become unhealthy. So ensuring that you drink a lot of water. I've cut back on sugary drinks long time ago. So I drink a lot of tea, a lot of water. When I get really tired, some coffee. But I tried not to make that a regular. Eating healthy, trying to stay away from the starches, especially when you can't exercise as much as you like. That's the way I'm doing it. But as soon as this hectic schedule, the formation is finished, then I'm going to go back to at least 3 times per week, doing some walking, doing some biking and other activities. My staff has been begging me, because I'm a dancer, to incorporate some weekly dance classes at the building, which I will lead. Okay. So I'm contemplating that.
All right. So
once the schedule relaxes. So I'm going to ask the people to send in, we're going to start a little poll and see if there's interest for that.
Excellent. Excellent. So the office of Prime Minister.
It's quite hectic.
It is. And I always tend to, when I'm in conversation with certain persons, I said, listen, the United States has its Oval Office. Mm-hmm. We have the cabinet of the Prime Minister in our new democracy. Mm-hmm. Looking at the office itself, and you've been held in the position now for a little while, and looking at how hectic it is. But looking at the office and its powers and its capabilities, shed some light that might just, help a young person who's looking at our new democracy, would like to be a prime minister one day. What can you describe about the office itself?
Okay. Well, a lot of the responsibilities, being leader of government, I don't think I stood still, is a very Dutch expression, long enough to think about what that really encompassed. You lead the Council of Ministers meeting. You're the chairperson. You decide as chairperson whether the actual document gets on the agenda to be discussed that day. So you have to have a lot of meetings and pre-meetings as a result of that. You still have your ministry to run. So the Ministry of General Affairs is huge: civil registry, security, the fire department, legal affairs, interior and kingdom relations, foreign affairs. All of these things require your constant attention. The ministry or the plenipotentiary ministry falls under the Prime Minister as well, basically represents us in the Netherlands. So there's interministerial meetings that need to happen because it can be on any topic. So literally, I find myself in meetings all day. And it's been a challenge. And I think moving forward, we really have to be able to cull out time to actually work on your goals, because you get so caught up in the day-to-day. You have goals that you want to achieve, and you have to be able to see it in action on a weekly basis. And then you're still you can be called to Parliament at any time and deal with that as well. So the office in and of itself, the responsibility is awesome. It is sometimes you have to stop and take a deep breath because it can become overwhelming. And I must say I have a lot of prayers following me within family, from the community. And they keep telling me, even the church community, despite some of the videos I've seen out lately, have been supportive of me as Prime Minister. And I must say I thank them for that, because at the end of the day, I hope to be judged on the way I execute the work of this office.
Excellent. As we mentioned, our guest in this edition of Prime Minister Talks is the Minister of VROMI, also broken down as Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Honorable Christopher Waver. Minister Waver, welcome once again. This next question is actually targeted to you to a certain degree.
Both of
actually
us.
shared responsibility, perhaps. Seeing that the government administration building is now located at the new site, our new government building, are there plans to demolish the old building? That's one. And is it a possibility to have the Claude Watty statue relocated somewhere at the new administration building?
Thank you for your question, Cedric. Well, where it is right now is there needs to be a tender process in order to start commencing with the demolition of the building. So that right now the Department of New Works is busy with that, and it's then making its round through the ministry. And once approved then by the Council of Ministers, and then the tender can take place, and then whoever wins the bid would then be responsible to demolish the building. As it pertains to the statue, in that sense, it will be discussed, conversation within the Council of Ministers, and whatever the Council of Ministers then decides as to what's best for that, I think then they will move forward with plans, either to relocate it or to leave it where it is at the moment.
Okay. Now, while that person might have focused on the statue, can we project a little bit into the future in regard to what's the plans for that area? Is there anything on the in the pipeline for discussion as regards to the future of that specific space? What are we going to do with it?
Well, once again, I think that depends on what the Council of Ministers wants to do with that space. There have been many discussions in the past as well, but never finalized. So I think we need to review everything that's on the table and then see what's best for the country and what's best for that space, especially the location where it is right now in the middle, in the heart of town. You want to make sure to utilize it the best possible way,
of course,
and how it could benefit the community in the whole. So based on that, I think the Council of Ministers will have all the information and then make the best possible decision.
If I may add, concerning that, Minister did mention that it would be a calm decision. I've noticed it's been there a while. I think we would need to get the history of, who placed it there, what was the purpose of it. I see a lot of family doing tributes, etc. But sometimes people, because they see a statue, they automatically think it's a monument. And sometimes we put things there for remembrances, for particular reasons. And I know Dr. Watty has a statue also at the harbor. So we would have to have discussions. And if it has been placed by the family, because I don't have the background knowledge as to the history of it being placed. So if it was placed by government, then yes, government has the authority to move it. If it has been placed by the family, then there would have to be a consultation also with the family and in the decision moving forward before COM can make a decision. And then where parking is concerned, I've also noticed you did kind of segue into that, and it is a question that is coming. So the government building right now, or the parking there, is being utilized for government, parliament, as well as police. And from the time we actually became the interim government, we looked at that as something that needed to be dealt with. So many cars being parked all over the place that are actually government workers. And I was even proposing and had a discussion with Facility Services and DMO that we would then calculate how many spaces are still left and actually come to some agreement that whether it's bank or other areas within that space could then, buy a monthly pass to be able to use the rest of the spaces. And it's a way that we can generate some revenue for government. And in the time after the demolition, prior to it becoming more developed, it will then also be able to serve as that for the country.
St. Martin, you're viewing and listening to episode 7 of Prime Minister Talks here on St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9. Stay with us. Your question as it relates to the Department of Domain Affairs is going to be posed to the Minister of Vromi in our next segment. Stay with us. You're listening to Prime Minister Talks.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvaria Jacobs.
Every day at the Civil Registry Department, we are confronted with at least one customer who did not pay attention to the expiration date of their passport, such as the Lockharts. To avoid this from happening to you and your family, we urge you to check the validity of your passport. If your passport is about to expire, please follow these simple steps to make an appointment. Visit appointments.stmartingov.org and follow the easy steps. All applicants must apply in person, last issued Dutch passport, 2 recent photos taken within 6 months. Minors must be present with legal guardians. Fee for adults, 210 guilders. Fee for minors, 150 guilders. Additional information can be requested. 4 weeks processing time. Your identity is your responsibility.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvaria Jacobs.
Welcome back to episode 7 of Prime Minister Talks. I'm Cedric Peterson alongside the Prime Minister of St. Martin, Sylvaria Jacobs, and our guest for this edition, the Minister of Vromi, the Honorable Christopher Waver. Question that we were just talking about as it dealt specifically with the parking situation. Is there future plans there, PM, that we can look at in regard to increasing the development of the parking area? You did hint towards development in that sector.
Right.
What more can be mentioned?
And I think even more so at the new government building, and I'm sure Minister Waver can go probably a little more in depth into that, but definitely there are plans for the development of more parking, and especially over at the new government building. I just mentioned that the old government building can be an opportunity in the area in the meantime before it is developed.
Yes, as it pertains to the parking lots directly across the new government building, that parking lot right now belongs to the APS. So they are responsible to develop. And I think in the discussions with them as well, parking is a main concern and a need for the people in that area. So that is something we will encourage APS to move forward and to finalize the plans that they have. Oftentimes companies or entities have access to land, but they don't utilize it in a timely manner, and that prolongs certain other developments that can take place. So we like to sit with them again and to find out where exactly they are as it pertains to the planning in developing that area, and then to see how we can assist as government pertaining to permits to move it along.
The next question stays with you, Minister Waver. Considering that government lacks a domain affairs department head at this time, what is the current state of the recruitment process for this position?
Well, thank you for the question. For a few years now, I think about two years, it has been running on the acting head. Right now, the acting head is the SG, Mr. Lewis Brown. But the ad has been advertised and people have applied already. So now it's just for P&O to finalize the whole recruitment process and then to see who is the most suitable candidate and then move forward with them.
And I think it translates also because I have to admit, I did give it some thought personally myself this week while watching Parliament and realizing that the department head of Public Works is now a member of Parliament. So the same principle that you just described there, would that apply to him as well?
Yes, I believe the advertisement for that vacancy will be published in tomorrow's paper, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So tomorrow.
Some interesting dynamics.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting dynamics.
Right now, actually, the ministry itself has one permanent head, and the rest are just functioning as acting.
Right.
So that does something as well for continuation to make sure things move along. So we are encouraging that these ads are being placed and that we can find suitable candidates to fill these vacant positions as soon as possible, because I know in different ministries as well, they're facing the same issues, where then people are acting for 6-7 years, and then that's causing then a confusion within the ministry as well. So you don't want to wait too long and then cause unnecessary confusion. So
yeah, Prime Minister, it goes back to one of our earlier episodes when I mentioned the dynamics. We were talking specifically about the formateur process and finding candidates for positions, but we also factored in the fact that we are a part of a small community. So will we be challenged in this particular area trying to find suitable candidates and things of that sort for positions, especially if people are going to be, choosing different paths in their careers?
I think especially because of the short terms that each government has set, it has created more movement than is normal over a 4-year span of time. Yeah. So with this new settlement, which we hope that we will have for 4 years, we can then now finalize some of these things, because some of these things maybe were in the process, and then because of a change of government, people moved around and it caused another change. So this has caused quite some stagnation of work as well. So we have, as a Council of Ministers, taken the decision that we would have the positions be put out, those that are acting, so that we can... if the person who is acting in the position, if you take a across-the-board decision to say if you've been acting for X amount of time, then you become that person, but you haven't been evaluated, you haven't been, nobody has actually evaluated you. It is actually unfair. It's unfair to you that you've been acting that long, but it's also unfair if, for instance, that you're not qualified for the function or not up to par, that you are then permanently there. So we believe that we will open up. Now we have decided that we will open up the functions, have the ads put out, bring in the candidates that apply, and then, if that person who has been working there knows the job, then they would be the preferred candidate. But you're not going to say that ahead of time.
Right.
So not by me saying this now, that means that that's what it is.
Right.
We're just saying with your years of experience, because experience counts for something, you should be heads and shoulders above any other candidate. So, I would just say to those persons, have no fear, be confident, and ensure that your letter of application, your CV, and your experience gets you into that interview, and that you are then able to meet up with all those others who may be vying for that job. I think we have a culture of holding on to things for a long time. I think it's good that others want to elevate, and I've seen that within the ministry, as now P&O falls under me, personnel and organization. And I've asked them also within the next 6 months to have the department heads evaluate the personnel. And so I'm challenging personnel as well as department heads across the board in government to assess your workers and challenge them, and let them challenge themselves to, am I functioning? Am I not functioning? Where would I better be able to serve government? And fill those slots that are open. We do have open slots. And then what is left, then we do a heavy recruiting to get it filled. Because I would like to see the organization that has people who are happy in their work and who are thriving. Because once the individual person is happy and thriving, the organization thrives. If each person can see their value to the organization, then I think government in and of itself, because we like to say government and think on these 7 people who swear the oath or make the promise. But government is the people who are working in government. Right. And I would like to empower them to make the changes that they want to see as well.
St. Martin, you're listening and viewing Prime Minister Talks. This is episode number 7. Our last segment is going to go into the topic of civil servants and trade between St. Martin and Curacao. These topics coming up in our last segment of Prime Minister Talks. Stay tuned.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvia Jacobs.
Every day at the Civil Registry Department, we are confronted with at least one customer who did not pay attention to the expiration date of their passport, such as the Lockharts. To avoid this from happening to you and your family, we urge you to check the validity of your passport. If your passport is about to expire, please follow these simple steps to make an appointment. Visit appointments.stmartingov.org and follow the easy steps. All applicants must apply in person, last issued Dutch passport, 2 recent photos taken within 6 months. Minors must be present with legal guardians. Fee for adults, 210 guilders. Fee for minors, 150 guilders. Additional information can be requested. 4 weeks processing time. Your identity is your responsibility.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvia Jacobs.
And welcome back to our final segment of Prime Minister Talks. I'm joined with the Prime Minister, Sylvia Jacobs, and the Minister of Vromi, the Honorable Christopher Waver. Thank you so much for joining us. If you just tuned in, we're going to take our last 2 questions that you posed to the Prime Minister's Cabinet this week. Do you believe that there should be consequences for civil servants that are caught victimizing other civil servants? Very sensitive.
Yes, a very sensitive one. That's why we've been having all these discussions about integrity, about ensuring that you have a trusted person. We are working on that as well. But as government, each case is addressed individually. There is a LMA, you would hear people saying that, which is a national ordinance that regulates civil service. So it's a National Ordinance Civil Service Law, Dutch LMA, with rules and regulations, which also addresses employee relations and conduct. So a personal integrity officers are assigned, as I mentioned, so that if you feel that another civil servant is doing something wrong or without integrity or, in fact, against you, you can confidentially report him or her to that designated personal integrity officer. And this was something that started quite a while ago. I could remember that when I was the first time minister, 2012-13, and you can still see it sometimes under some civil servants' emails, integrity starts with me. Mm-hmm. And I think it's something, we have decided we will ensure that starts back up, that each person within government employ is re-educated as to what integrity looks like and if a person claims integrity, how they behave and act. And the personal integrity officer within each department will be identified with a substitute so that if there's an issue, each person knows who they can go to have their case brought forward and dealt with.
Can I just
sure.
add? I think government has a lot of tools in place already. But I think it's just what PM mentioned as well. It's just to educate the civil servants as to their rights and where they can go. But I think there's a lot of things in place already. We just need to tap into them and utilize them more efficient.
Yeah, makes sense. And that's the challenge we have as an organization moving forward. Our final question for the segment, can St. Martin engage in trade with Curacao? And if so, how would this, the person says, look, but how would this work?
Yes, of course. St. Martin is open for trade with Curacao and many others. There are currently no restrictions such as tariffs or barriers in order for us to do so. Trading between St. Martin and Curacao would be on a local trade level. This means that if St. Martin has or is producing a commodity that is in high demand for Curacao and Curacao has or is producing a commodity that is in high demand for St. Martin, local or domestic trading can take place in this aspect. So the benefits that St. Martin, most outside countries and foreign revenue service provide that purpose for St. Martin and a sustainable growth for the economy. So we would, of course, welcome trade with any country. Of course, we know that dollars push our economy. Curacao is a guerrilla economy, so I know a lot of people actually look at it in terms of if we look at fruits and vegetables and how come the prices are so much lower in Curacao. So I think I've heard people talk about, certain business associations on St. Martin being in existence and St. Martin local businesses not having one. So I think this would be a great opportunity within our planning for the next 4 years to encourage that St. Martin local businesses work together and find partners, especially within the kingdom, but in my travels to Suriname even, and in all this talk about agriculture, et cetera, that we look at ways in which we can broaden our agricultural product, even if it means leasing land in places like Suriname, Guyana, name it, where they have large tracts of land for not expensive prices, where we would be able to grow our own fruits, et cetera, and food in larger quantities to supply for the people of St. Martin. Right. Because I think cost of living and importing everything from Europe and now seeing all of the issues that we're having with traveling and with the issues with China and so on, this can really, I don't think we've stood and stopped and wondered how in the long run this can negatively impact St. Martin's economy, even if the virus never ever touches down here.
That's correct.
Based on how much we import and based on how much we rely on travel.
Right. Yeah. And this thing is that it's also affects us, actually. We always look at it from the seasonal perspective, where hurricane seasons, what would happen when the east coast of the United States gets impacted by a Category 5, and it happens to be, one of the port areas that we use. How it would impact us
big time.
And that's hurricane season. But now we're actually looking at the fact of, from a health perspective, is another factor.
But just to elaborate a little bit on the agricultural aspect of it, part of the vision I had and would like to still see carried out is to have, I know we don't have much parcels of government land remaining, but we can see what's available in certain districts and have a community gardens, and spread it out throughout the island. So therefore you don't need one large plot, but then you can minimize the size and even utilize within the school systems and within the schools to have their grounds that you can learn it from young. You can teach the children how to grow certain vegetables, plants, and therefore we can sustain ourselves in that sense, and that will bring down the cost as well and help the economy grow in a different area as well. Yeah. So especially for like Belvedere, there is land available there where we can see how to utilize that, and then we can see what's available in the Kobe area, and then see how we can spread out. There's enough persons out there that have started their own gardening as well, that are willing to assist government, at no cost, but just to assist because they have a vision as well and they want to see it further as well than just to keep it to themselves. So I think we need to tap into that.
Definitely.
PM?
Yes, definitely agriculture and creating more opportunity for the development of agriculture on St. Martin, not just for our own health, but as a business opportunity, is something that this government coming in definitely would be looking into. And when I mentioned those other types, is like a different type of business on a more macro scale, because we do, as a hub, also export.
Right.
So, in looking at this question in terms of producing a commodity that you can export, diversifying our economy, that is one of the ways. And in finalizing our governing program, I do expect that these types of initiatives will form part of our 4-year plan. And I must say, I mentioned it briefly in press briefing this week, but the National Development Vision will also soon be shared, whereby it's a decade plan for St. Martin, and that not just government, but all stakeholders will then be able to see themselves as part of moving St. Martin forward.
This is all the time we have. Final words, Prime Minister.
Yes, first I want to thank my colleague, Minister Waver, for joining me today. I look forward to having other ministers join, of course. And even though he's saying he would like to still see his vision executed for agriculture and other things, a lot of continuity does happen within government. And I'm sure once those plans are laid down, they will be embraced as long as it's good for the country. And that we continue as St. Martin to work together from whichever function we might find ourselves in. as St. Martin always comes first. And I thank all our listeners and viewers for tuning in weekly. Next week will be Women's Celebration. So even if your questions come in and they're not around that, they'll be deferred for the next week.
Okay.
But we are celebrating women in the week of the 1st to the 8th of March as government. And I hope that St. Martin joins us in this.
Looking forward to that episode of the program. Prime Minister, Minister Waver, thank you so much for joining us in this edition of the program. And of course, to our radio listeners and television viewers, thank you for tuning in and being a part of Prime Minister Talks. If you've missed this episode, be sure to stay tuned in first and foremost right here on St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM throughout the course of the day. Actually, make that specific. It should be 12 p.m. every day until next week with our next edition of the program. And of course, for video on demand, log on to the official government website, stmartingov.org. On behalf of the Prime Minister's Cabinet and all of us here at the Department of Communication, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thanks for tuning in.